No, and
Fiona.
Can you briefly fill us in with the recent history leading up to Martin Bell's campaign, Sarah?
Certainly, it's a very controversial issue that dates back to 1992, and in some ways, understandably perhaps, it's also a very sensitive human issue, because in essence, what is happening is the two families of the soldiers involved are fighting to overturn what they claim is an unjust life sentence for murder, and the family of the victim is fighting for what they claim is justice for a life lost. But just to give you some idea of what went on that Friday morning, just take a look at this.
On the 4th of September 1992, Peter McBride left his sister's house in the New Lodge district of Belfast. As he walked down the street, the 18-year-old Catholic father of two was stopped, searched and then released by an army foot patrol. Minutes later, he was dead, shot in the back as he ran from two Scots guardsmen. Eyewitnesses accused the two soldiers of gunning down the teenager despite orders from their own commanding officer not to open fire. James Fisher and Mark Wright later claimed they had fired on a suspect they believed was armed with a coffee jar bomb and a gun. The police confirmed Peter McBride, whose youngest daughter was only 9 weeks old when he died, had no paramilitary connections. In 1995, both soldiers were given life sentences for what the judge described as cold-blooded murder.
OK, Sarah Holden, thanks for that. That's the story so far. And last night, GMTV spoke to Jean McBride, the mother of Peter McBride. He was the teenager shot dead by soldiers James Fisher and Mark Wright. This is what Jean McBride had to say about Martin Bell's campaign to free the men.
I'm totally disgusted. Why that man thought that he had to jump on this bandwagon with these people. He had the cheek to write to me, insult my intelligence, trying to soften the blow. I'd have preferred that he didn't write to me and just let me hear it on the media, the way I hear everything else. Martin Bell obviously did not read anything about my son's trial. And then at the end of the day, he's not disputing that they didn't murder Peter, but he's asking for two murderers to be released onto the streets.
Well, Martin Bell joins us now. You heard that, Martin. Jean McBride is pretty disgusted, to say the least, with your campaign. She also says that you're asking for murderers to be let out onto the streets.
I took this case on with a great deal of reluctance because it is controversial. But I think there is a distinction, in justice anyway there should be, between two young men serving their country who made a terrible mistake. And I would even go so far as to say it was a murderous mistake. They committed murder. But they're being treated, they've been sentenced, they're being treated as common murderers, like people who sort of go out intending to murder. And this is not so. This is not so. And I think there should be a distinction. A lot of people in this country feel the same.
OK, but Martin, Jean McBride told us she thinks that you've no right to campaign for these men to be released. We're going to hear a little more about what she had to say right now.
Martin Bell, to me, should mind his own business and get on with his own life and do whatever else he has to do. I wonder if I had to approach Martin Bell before their families did, if he had jumped on the bandwagon for me. Because that's all he's doing. If that man can sit inside of his own mouth that they murdered my son, what right has he to stand up and say release them? Because they're British soldiers. If Peter had murdered any one of them too, I'd have been sitting here today, contented enough to know that my son would serve a life sentence. I wouldn't have had anybody campaigning for my son. Totally disgusted with Martin Bell.
Well, you said it yourself, Martin, and Jean McBride said it just then. It's because the men are British soldiers that you want them to be released. Now, do you think there should be different laws for soldiers on duty found guilty of murder?
Well, I think there is a distinction. I think if there's anger, let it be directed at whoever sent them onto the streets. I cannot think of a better illustration of the need for a settlement to this conflict in Northern Ireland. Nothing is going to restore Peter McBride to his mother, and I don't wish to add to the grief. But there are other victim families here. I know leaders of the minority community in Northern Ireland who also believe that Guardsmen Fisher and Wright are also, in a sense, victims of the conflict.
We've lost Martin Bell there. Sorry about that. He's coming back to us. Martin, can you hear us now? Sorry,
yeah,
our satellite went a bit strange on you there. I'll move this on in that case, Martin. The fact is that these soldiers did murder Peter McBride. They shot him in the back. They shot not once, but 5 times.
Yes, they're now in their 6th year in jail. Later this month, they'll be serving their 2000th day. In the comparable cases of Private Thane and Clegg, the sentences were between 3 and 4 years. I'm raising the case because, you know, it's time to consider that these young men also are victims of the conflict.
Well, Peter McBride's mother says that her son was murdered. Murder is murder. Here she is again, Martin.
My family and myself, we'll remember them all our living days. Let them 2 boys do their life sentences. They murdered somebody. If they murdered somebody in Britain, they do life sentences, no bother. The uniform saving them? No, not a chance. I'll fight them tooth and nail to keep them where they are. They'll not walk out any back doors.
Well, you heard her there again, Martin. She's going to fight tooth and nail to keep those 2 soldiers in prison. Do you really think you can win this campaign to free them?
Well, I mean, they're going to get out in the end. Very few prisoners actually serve life sentences. The case is due to be reviewed in October of this year, in fact. We're now well into the 6th year. I mean, they have been treated as common murderers, and if that satisfies Mrs. McBride, that's what's happened. I'm saying now that it is time to temper justice with mercy.
But Martin, these are trained military men. I mean, if there is no such deterrent as a life prison sentence for soldiers who murder people, then it's a license to kill almost, isn't it?
I don't think it's seen that way in the army. I know soldiers are very increasingly reluctant to serve in Northern Ireland because they see what's happened to soldiers who make terrible mistakes. I've become, I suppose, willy-nilly the Member of Parliament for soldiers in trouble. And let's make it quite clear: this was murder. They were convicted of it. They have served substantial sentences already.
OK, Martin Bell, we know you're taking this to the House of Commons this afternoon. It's a long day for you. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Thank you. Ross.
It's 23 minutes past 7.